Hello, and thank you for tuning in. Thank you for joining us in the first ever virtual expo by New York Mutual Trading. We're so excited to get started, and our GM and Vice President, Ami Nakanishi, is here to shoot us off and welcome everybody to the show. Miss Ami-san, yoroshiku
Yes.
onegai shimasu.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to New York Mutual's first virtual expo. Thank you for joining us. My name is Amina Kanishi. I'm the General Manager of New York Mutual Trading. I'd like to thank all of our customers for their continued business. We appreciate the support and trust. This year, we had to cancel our annual Japanese Food and Restaurant Expo due to the COVID-19 pandemic. We are disappointed that we could not see all of you in person, and I'm sure our suppliers feel the same way. Hopefully next year, we can all once again meet in person. This pandemic has changed everything. Most of our customers are struggling during these unprecedented times. We must support one another. New York Mutual will continue to do as much as we can to support our customers. And we will continue to work together to fight through all of this until the market recovers. This virtual expo is our latest challenge. Thank you for choosing to spend your valuable time with us. Hope you enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ami-san. And today we have a really big treat for you. I'd like to introduce Sarah Guterbach, who will be hosting us through the first part of our first webinar, Sake and Food Pairing Magic. Sarah, take it away.
Well, good morning, everybody. Very, very happy to see so many people logging in early this morning. I'm very excited about what we've put together to share with you today. For those of you hopefully joining us for the day, we have additional seminars that are occurring throughout the day. We're doing a wonderful Kanzake program starting at noon and also a sustainability seminar starting at 2. So we highly recommend that you try to stay with us throughout the day. And of course, the MTC trade show includes all things MTC. So we have the following week, our kitchen week, and then the week after that is our food week. So you can see there's a whole litany of other seminars you can attend. Please join us throughout the following weeks to learn more about what we have to offer you. As we get started, I just wanted to make sure everyone was familiar with our special guests and our panelists and moderator today. First, as our panelists, we have Rachel Io-Fakowski. She is the director of our Japanese beverage specialist team at New York Mutual. She was the one who welcomed everybody in. Maxwell Lear is here as well, who is also one of our Japanese beverage specialists and handles some of the northern states as well as parts of Manhattan. And my name is Sarah E. Guterbach. I am one of the newest members of the team. I've been working with New York Mutual, though, for many years as a buyer and also the Sake School of America as an educator. I have been in food and beverage basically ever since I started working. Back at the age of 16, my first job was at a Ruby Tuesday, and I've sort of moved through the ranks. I'm with the Court of Master Sommeliers. I'm a certified wine educator, and I have my diploma in wine and spirits from the Wine and Spirits Education Trust. And then I'm also a educator with the Wine and Spirits Education Trust for sake and wine. I have my Kiki Sake Shi and my sake diploma through the Japan Sommelier Association and lots of other goofy letters. I joke around that if you mix them up, they spell cork dork. So anyway, I'm really happy to be presenting today. Masai Kasuda is our moderator today. So she's going to be checking the chat and the Q&A area. We encourage you please to ask questions and to make this as interactive as possible. And then we have some really incredible special guests from our distinguished breweries. Leo Yoshimura has got a very entertaining thing, I think, about to happen. We're all very excited to see what he has planned from Kikusui USA. We also have Chizuko-san and Yuzo-san from Nanbu Bijin Brewery, and the distinguished Timothy Sullivan, sake samurai and ambassador for Hakkaisan, is with us as well today. And so all of them will be sharing some special information about their breweries and their favorite food pairings. So as we get started, you know, we're using a lot of bandwidth these days for Zoom. If for any reason my feed is interrupted, please just stay tuned. I'll pop on as soon as possible. Sometimes I think my cats are interfering with my internet reception, but hopefully we won't run into any issues. But just stay tuned and one of us will sort of pick up for the other if for any reason there's an interruption. So these are the objectives for today. We're going to talk about the science of sake and food pairing and sort of what it is about the way the palate and the nose works, what we taste and how that works when we're creating beverage pairings, and why in particular sake is special, in particular when it's compared to other beverages like wine. We'll also open up the floor to discuss some of our favorite food pairings today. Again, we have wonderful guest speakers from Kikusui, Nanbu Bijin, and Hakkaisan. And at the end, we hope to open it up for some Q&A. Those of you who buy from us, there is some very special pricing opportunities for people in the New York area and our buyers from out of state. And there's a raffle at the end, so please stay till the end. We are going to be drawing a name at random, and one of you will walk away today with a set of glassware that's not available anywhere else outside of Japan besides here. So hopefully you will stay to win. I mentioned earlier, please ask questions. Hopefully everyone's pretty familiar with Zoom, but you can use the chat or you can use the Q&A, and Masai-san will keep an eye on that and interrupt me as needed. Or any of us who are speaking, just to make sure we get the question. So let's jump in. I wanted to begin by just sort of chatting a little bit about what a privilege it is to start to take away the layers and understand the way the palate works. The human body is pretty amazing. We have a special olfactory node at the back of our palate that sends messages to the brain about what we're tasting and what we are smelling. And the palate works sort of symbiotically, where the tongue tastes certain things, the nose tastes certain things. We're going to be dividing these layers up today into the main tastes that the palate distinguishes with sweetness, saltiness, bitterness, umami, and on. But it's important to note, just as you look at this cake, that all the layers work together. So that's what makes food pairings somewhat difficult. It's not just about acidity or sweetness. It's about all the things that are going on. So I encourage you to kind of think about that as we go through layer by layer today to learn about the dynamics of sake and food pairing. So the tongue has limited sensations and tastes. It's actually quite limited. And I think it's really interesting in the United States because, you know, we talk about how, you know, food smells so good while it's cooking, and then we talk about how food tastes so good while we're eating. But the truth is that the nose is really what's telling us what the flavors are. The tongue is only tasting a few things. So scientifically, we know that we can taste sweetness, saltiness, sourness, bitterness, and umami, that savory, delicious character on the tongue. There are also a couple of theoretical tastes, including metallic and fat, that have not yet fully been proven by science, but they're working on that, finding exactly which taste buds are responsible for allowing us to taste metallic and fat. Fat can actually taste bitter to some super tasters. The tongue also tastes texture and sensation. So texture would be things like, is it creamy? Is it rough? Is it crunchy? Fat might be oily and mouth coating. We can, of course, taste the difference between something that's warm or cold in terms of temperature. And then hot spice, obviously that capsaicin burning are also things that the tongue distinguishes. It's really, again, the nose that distinguishes all of the flavors. So just to kind of break that down, the tongue will say, wow, that's sour. But the nose is what's going to tell you that it's a lemon. When it comes to sweetness, sweetness is one of the things that can be very difficult to pair. When there's sweetness in the food, it makes a beverage seem more dry and more astringent. It's one of the reasons why sweetness is one of the more difficult things to pair with beverages like wine, because wine tends to be dry and tends to be astringent. So when you have a sweet food and you try to pair it with a wine like that, it just makes the wine taste really, really rough. Sake is generally sweeter than wine. It also has much less acidity and astringency, so it tends to pair much better with foods with sweetness in it. So like this example here of a mango roll, where you have a lot of sweetness from the fruit, sake is going to stand up to that in a much more smooth way than a wine generally will. Drier sake will make the food seem sweeter. Sweeter sake will make the food seem less sweet. And across the board, regardless of the beverage, we always recommend that you try to match sweetness to sweetness evenly. So the sweetness in the beverage should try to match the sweetness in the food as much as possible. This actually brings me to one of my favorite food pairings that happened with sake some years ago. I was actually doing a sake versus wine dinner, and the chef had prepared a duck breast with an orange sauce. And so, it was duck, so I kind of went the direction of having a Pinot Noir to go with that for a red wine. And then I sort of took a daring step and chose a sparkling sake to go with this duck. And it was amazing how much the sake beat out the wine 100%, because there was so much sweetness in the orange sauce, and it matched the sweetness of the sake. And the sake's bubbles cleansed the palate for the fat of the duck. So anyway, it was one of those moments where the earth stopped turning on its axis, and I think everybody at that tasting was incredibly surprised that a sparkling sake beat out a Pinot Noir with the duck dish. Saltiness makes this sake or any beverage taste more fruity. It will make sake seem less astringent and acidic. And salt has this amazing opportunity to marry with umami and create this explosion of flavor. This is one of the reasons why sake tends to match very well with anything made with soy sauce. Sake and anything salty, again, becomes umami magic. So I always recommend to people too, if you're running a bar, if you have a restaurant, people have salty snacks, even just things like edamame are fantastic with sake. It can be very, very simple, but I love sake and popcorn so much together. I will actually sometimes smuggle it into the movie theater. Haven't been able to do that for a while because of COVID times. But anyway, sake and popcorn, anything salty, potato chips, fabulous match. Wanted to chat quickly about umami because I've noticed as my career expands that there's a lot of people that choose to describe umami as an earthiness, and I don't think that's always the correct way to describe umami. Part of that comes from the fact that we use an example of taking a raw mushroom and tasting it, and it tastes like fungus, and comparing it to a roasted mushroom, which has a rich, savory, delicious flavor. And the difference there is sort of how one might describe umami. But there are many other foods that don't have an earthy taste like a mushroom that can also be described as having high umami. Ripe tomatoes are a really great example of this. They have a spreading deliciousness, a great amount of sweetness that just lingers, not necessarily earthy. So when we're talking about umami, I think the best description is a sensation of lingering deliciousness in the mouth that just sort of spreads across the entire palate. And it's important to note that umami acts as a flavor enhancer. So when it comes to sake and umami can be a difficult thing to pair with wine, just like sugar. So umami and sugar actually act very similarly when they're paired with wine, but umami adds this additional unpleasant taste to wine. Sometimes you get this kind of metallic, lingering, unpleasant character in the mouth. Sake is umami's best friend. If you have the saltiness, as I mentioned before, it just explodes with the umami because of the glutamic acid that's in the sake. The higher the umami of the sake, the more it will then enhance the flavor of the food. So the lower grades of sake, things like junmai, honjozoshu, some of the tokubetsu lines, they tend to be a bit more umami rich because the rice isn't polished as much. These will bring out flavors in the food even more than often a daiginjo sake will. It's also interesting to note that there are amino acids in the sake that help to create that umami, but also in many, many foods. So when you combine those different acid complexes with one another, the combinations are infinite, and the amount of deliciousness that one can experience can just really soar. This brings us to sourness and acidity. And I always like to mention, because this was a big epiphany for me, that not all acids in sake taste sour. When we think about acidity, we think about sour taste, we think about lemon, but there are acids in sake that taste savory, some that taste bitter, and some that might even come out as sort of seeming salty. When you marry acid with acid, the acid mitigates one another. So this is where we come to that classic pairing of a Sauvignon Blanc from the Loire and a high acid goat cheese from Loire, where when you taste that high acid wine with the high acid goat cheese, it makes the goat cheese seem more nutty. And when the high acid goat cheese is then tasted back with that sour tasting wine, the wine becomes more fruity. So acidity in one item will actually lessen your impression of the acidity in the other. Sake is far less sour than wine. So you're not necessarily going to have that, mitigation. But when you have gentle pickles like Japanese pickles, it can make that acidity pop in the pickle. And when you come back from that acidic pickle to the sake will seem even sweeter and richer. Acidity is also known to cut fat. It cleanses the palate. So if you have a steak or something that's rich and buttery, having a higher acid sake will cleanse the palate and make each bite of that next thing taste even more delicious. We highly recommend sakes like Yamahai or Kimoto to help and enhance that characteristic. It's also fantastic with those higher acid sakes to experiment with things like pickles or other higher acid items for that mitigation character. Bitterness is an interesting one because sake generally has little to no bitterness. If you have bitterness in sake, it tends to be a byproduct of yeast, and it tends to be very delicate, almost just like a gentle astringency. Very different from the level of bitterness that you would get from tannin in a wine. The problem with the bitterness is that when you combine something that has bitterness in it with food that has bitterness in it, the two just exacerbate one another. So you might have ordered a big Napa Cabernet to go with a steak, and the steak is then served with bitter greens. Well, what'll happen is the bitterness of the wine will marry with the bitterness of those greens, and the two will just start, growing and growing and growing until you just have this really strong, unpleasant astringency in the mouth. So it's really kind of interesting to note that you can experiment with this with sake because it will cleanse the palate and reduce the bite of bitterness. I have this picture here of this raw walnut here because it's a great experiment to try at home. If you take a raw walnut without any salt on it, you taste it, it has a strong bitter character from the skin, and then you taste sake, it'll erase the bitterness and it'll just draw out the nutty flavor of the walnut. I mentioned earlier that super tasters can perceive fat as being bitter. So again, looking at certain styles of sake with steak can be an absolutely amazing marriage, something worth trying at steakhouses anytime. Hot spice increases the alcohol burn. It can also increase bitterness and acidity and astringency in a beverage. I think the biggest thing here to note is because sake tends to be sweeter than wine, it will actually lessen the sensation of heat. One of my favorite types of pairings is to have a sweeter nigori style sake or a sweeter sparkling style sake with like a really hot Thai curry. Those two things can be really, really fantastic together. Again, sake being low in bitterness and astringency will not enhance that hot spice. The one area to be cautious though is with alcohol. Some sakes can be very high in alcohol, and that alcohol alone can burn. So if you're somebody who's sensitive to hot spice, you may wish to choose a sake that has lower alcohol content in order to balance out that heat. I would be remiss if I didn't touch on the magic of sake and seafood. Sakana is the Japanese word for fish, and sake is absolutely proven by science to reduce fishiness. When there are components that build up seafood that when they're added to wine produce really smelly, fishy smelling oxidized alcohols. They're called aldehydes. And it's been proven when you add these same fatty acids to sake, they make less aldehydic characteristics. So sake does not react with fish in the same way that wine does. Sake also has no added sulfur. In fact, it's important to note that it's actually illegal to add sulfur dioxide to sake. It could not be called sake if it had that added. And this is an element that is thought to increase fishiness. Sulfur dioxide is a common additive to wine, and it's never added to sake. Sake is also made with very, very pure water that is free of iron. Iron can also make a metallic characteristic when married with fish. So all of this sort of comes together to the point that sake reduces fishiness so much that if you're a person that really enjoys fishy taste, you can actually be disappointed. I'm somebody who's a bit sensitive to fishiness. I've always noticed that wine tends to enhance fishy flavor. It might immediately reduce it when you take your first sip, but then it'll kind of come back on the palate, whereas sake will completely erase it. So if you haven't tried maybe a piece of smoked salmon and some sake side by side recently, highly recommend that experiment as well. So most of you, I'm sure, are familiar with the different styles of sake and their flavors. The ginjo style sakes have that ginjo ka, that floral aroma character. They tend to be very, very aromatic. And if they don't say ginjo, you can kind of take for granted that the sake will be a little bit more savory. Generally speaking, ginjo sakes tend to be more fruity and light and aromatic than sakes that don't say ginjo on the label. For that reason, some of these ginjo sakes and daiginjo sakes can be so delicate that you almost just want to drink them all by themselves. I've had that experience many times where you're drinking a sake that's just so ethereal, so magical that you're like, I don't even want to try this with food because it's just going to take away from the experience of the sake. These, generally speaking, though, are going to go very well with traditional Japanese sushi and sashimi dishes, more delicate dishes like tempura. And then when you're looking toward American foods, lighter fare like salads, fish, all of the sort of lighter dishes can be amazing with these daiginjo and ginjo type sakes. And with world cuisine, I always recommend people explore things like Indian and Moroccan food, Moroccan spice. There are certain yeasts that are used to produce the ginjo and daiginjo sakes that produce very similar aromatics that you get in that exotic spice of Moroccan foods as well. So lots of non-Japanese cuisine that you can experiment with. The non-ginjo sakes, the junmai and honjozo styles, tend to be less fruity and floral. They tend to be a little bit more ricey. The floral characteristics may be a little bit more like dried flowers. They're more likely to have an earthy characteristic or maybe a nutty characteristic. Overall, they can be described as being more savory. And I mentioned earlier that these grades are also going to have higher umami, so they'll have a higher flavor enhancing effect on the food that they are paired with. This is where you get to really be in the devil's playground with American food in particular. So these sakes go much better with richer and fattier foods. When it comes to Japanese food, any of that Japanese comfort food, karaage, ramen, these are going to be fantastic with lower grades, often warmed sake. And in the United States here, man, this is where you're going to go for the pizza and the burgers and the barbecue. And as I mentioned, my favorite, popcorn. Warm sakes are going to be fantastic with soup. I've got a little bit more information on that. And I already mentioned trying those sweeter, lower alcohol sakes with the hot and spicy dishes. So one of the things that sake has that no other beverage really does, we can see this in shochu as well, but when it comes to traditional alcoholic beverages made in other parts of the world, very little has this in common where you can actually warm the beverage and enjoy it hot. So this gives you a wide variety of temperatures to play with your pairings. It can be really wonderful in the wintertime to have a hot sake with hot food. It balances the body and it warms you from the inside out. And I think especially now with COVID times where more people are going to be eating outside under heat lamps in order to stay safe, I think we're going to see a bit of a boom in people wanting to drink these warm beverages. So I encourage everyone to think about new ways, and of course stay tuned for our Kanzake seminar here. These are the two most popular temperatures for warming sake, and you notice that the hottest here is only 122 degrees Fahrenheit. I like to stress this. I think quite often people overheat their hot sake and it starts to create unpleasant flavors. So gently warming the sake is imperative for creating the best experience. A little bit of last minute food for thought here. Regional sakes with their different regional cuisines are usually going to work well together, just like foods of Northern Italy go with the wines of Northern Italy. You know, sakes of Northern Japan will go great with their foods. You may want to think about the weight and richness of the food. So bigger and umami-driven sakes are going to go better with the heavier dishes, lighter sakes with lighter fare. Sometimes, though, opposites can attract. So those light Tande Karakuchi Kirei style sakes from Niigata can be unbelievable with fried foods because they just take a lift off the palate and cleanse the palate so the next bite is even tastier. Remember as well that, you know, sake is not just for Japanese food, and the Japanese eat far more than just sushi. Sake is designed to go with everything, so you can try as many foods and as many sakes together. Just have fun with it. The worst you can do is, you know, lose some boredom, right? You'll at least be entertained. Last but not least here, your opinion matters far more than the science here. So, you know, for instance, I was talking about how, you know, the high alcohol content of certain sakes can exacerbate heat or hot spice in a dish. Well, if you like hot and spicy food, you might actually really, really like having high alcohol sake with hot and spicy food because it just enhances it. For somebody else, that might be a huge deterrent. It's just too much for them. So consider your opinions. Your opinions matter tremendously. So that brings us to opening up the floor here a little bit. I know that I believe Rachel had some stuff to share. I'm gonna actually stop sharing here for just a moment so that we can talk a little bit about our other favorite food and wine pairings.
We
Rachel,
also
did you
had
want
a
to go?
really nice, yeah, absolutely. We also had a really nice food pairing question in the chat. Somebody
Oh,
was curious about the favored sake and pizza pairing. And I think we all have very strong opinions about this.
yeah. Yes. Who wants to go first? Maybe Maxwell.
I would absolutely like to go first. My favorite sake and pizza pairing is Hawaiian pizza with Leo's Kikusui Funaguchi. It is so delicious, and everybody just has to accept that.
There's no argument, right?
No, not at
Well, if
all.
you think about it, it makes a lot of sense, right? Because you've got a little bit of extra sweetness in there that
And the
goes with the
acid from the
pineapple. Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah.
it's
So
perfect.
good.
And then that little bit of oil and fat from like the ham and like I usually don't eat pork. And another thing I usually don't eat but will have with sake, I hate corn and I hate butter, but the Korean barbecue scene has this dish which is corn and butter covered in mozzarella cheese. I don't know if you can see it. I had this once after an event. We did a Korean barbecue, and the only sake from Mutual that they had was a nigori, so I happily ordered the nigori. And when I had a bite of this corn dish that, you know, it was the only thing on the table at the time, and a sip of the nigori sake, it completely transformed both. Two things that I usually don't drink, don't eat, um, turned into something that I kind of want to eat every single day. So that's my weird sake love pairing. Do you have any pizza opinions, Sarah Maxwell?
I
Shizuko?
tend to agree with you on the Funaguchi series. I think that's an outstanding option. I also am a big Kimoto and Yamahai lover, that higher acid sake, because it matches with the tomato sauce, the acid of the tomato. And then again, it cleanses the palate for the fat. A lot of those sakes too, just have a whole lot of additional umami going on and kind of marry with that. Maxwell, what about you? Did you want to add anything? Maybe Tim has one. No?
Well, I've had some wonderful pizza and sake pairings over the years, but Rachel, I'm sorry I can't get down with the
I knew it.
But I am going to be talking in my remarks about Hakkaisan Honjozo, which is the best-selling sake from our brewery, and it has such a clean, dry body that I love to pair it with things, as I'll mention, with like Parmesan cheese. So a pizza that has kind of those nuttier cheeses on it, I really love with a dry Honjozo.
That's so cool.
We also have a question regarding other Italian foods, not just pizza.
Oh, Maxwell, you need to talk about your pasta that you make.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes down to it, cacio e pepe is sort of like adult savory macaroni and cheese. And for me, that's just absolute delight with, you know, a variety of different sake, but let's just say, you know, ginjo or daiginjo, aromatic, fruity, modern styles with a little bit more acidity. It's just heaven.
So I have one last kind of unusual story to share, and it has to do with the flavor enhancing qualities of sake. So I worked for many years for a large distributor in North Carolina, and I once had a sake vendor come and work with me. We worked the whole day. We had sake in the bag. We went to all these different accounts, and it was about 5 o'clock. We were at our last account, and we decided to just go up to the bar and order a glass of wine because the buyer wasn't ready to see us yet. So we ordered a glass of wine, and then the buyer comes up and he's like, okay, I'm ready to taste now. So I sort of ended up kind of like this. I had a glass of wine and I had a glass of sake, and I was double fisting here. And I sort of absentmindedly took a sip of the sake and then went to my wine. And the sake made the wine taste better. And my mind exploded. My mind blew up. So this was actually one of the things that led to me doing more events with sake versus wine. Because it's just become such a huge eye-opener for people, the way that sake plays off of things that you may never expect. So anyway, I think we ought to open up the floor for our first presenter from our breweries. And I believe that is Kikusui. Is that right? Do we have Kikusui going first? Leo?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Can you hear me well?
You're great.
We can.
Real clear.
All right. So I'm gonna start sharing the sound first.
That's quite an elaborate setup and some beautiful props you have behind you, Leo. What do you have planned for us today?
Well, you will see it. All right, ready? Can you hear the music?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I'm gonna start again, sorry. All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having us here today. My name is Leo Yoshimura, and this is Shinichi Kanai from Kikusui USA Inc. We both are sake specialists, and we travel the world to promote Kikusui sake to you. You probably have seen us somewhere, but for those who have not, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
So today, we're going to introduce you briefly about our sake brewery, and then going to talk about our top-selling product with the best casual food pairings. So let's begin. Kikusui Brewery was founded in 1881 in the 19th century. In the past history, Kikusui Brewery was destroyed and washed away twice because of the earthquakes and the heavy floods. But Kikusui stood strong, and now we are located in the safe small town called Shibata, Niigata Prefecture, where it's well known for a great sake making area. It has the best climate, weather, and the resources to make great sake in Niigata. Can you see the screen? Oops.
We can see the screen.
The video. Oh, there you go.
We can see the video.
Okay. We are surrounded by the snowy mountains and endless rice fields. We even have our own rice fields next to our crew. We use the soft snow melted water from the mountains, and we use the rice that is growing with that water. We make good sake, but good sake is not good enough. We need to make our sake great. The one last ingredient that is missing is people's mouth. The people who makes Kikusui, the people who sells Kikusui, and the people who drinks Kikusui. Without the ingredients of the without these ingredients, our sake will never become great. The goal is to make great sake that everyone can enjoy and have fun and smile with their loved ones. That's what makes great sake. So some of you might have questions about what is Kikusui? What does it mean? Hold on, I cannot get my... How do I get out of this? I cannot get out of it. Okay, can you see my face?
Yes, sir. That was
Yes.
wonderful, Leo.
All right. So, so you might have a question about what Kikusui means. What does it mean? Well, it's a simple, and let me tell you. The word kiku, it means chrysanthemum flower, and sui represents the water. But why we chose this name? Well, I have a story to tell you. Long time ago, going back to the medieval times in Japan, there was a very powerful kingdom in the Asian continent, where the king had all the powers to rule everything. But there was one thing that he could not rule, was his age. One day, the king requested his vassal to find fountain of youth. The vassal, the man, immediately started his quest for days and months and ended up in the deep woods. The man was lost. He could not find a way out. But one day, he saw a man sitting on the huge rocks, a hermit-looking old man with a long gray hair and beard. The man goes closer and asks, "Are you okay? Do you need help?" The old man says, "I was exiled to this place long time ago and have lived here all by myself since." The man says, "Well, how can you live here all by yourself with no food and water?" The old man says, "I don't need to eat anything. I could survive by just drinking the water dew from the chrysanthemum flower. And now I remember, I was about your age when I served the kingdom 700 years ago." Did the man return to the king with the fountain of youth? No one knows what happened to the man. The story ends here, and it's you to decide to end it happy ending or the worst case scenario. Anyway, the point is, the name Kikusui comes from the belief of the water, the belief of the fountains of youth from the Kikusui flower, the dew from the Kikusui flower. Chrysanthemum flower. Okay, so I hope I was speaking well. But anyway, enough of this storytelling. And let's move on to the fun part. Okay, so Mr. Funaguchi, can I have my sake, please? Thank you. So this is the first can sake. This is called Kikusui Funaguchi, gold can. This is the first can sake produced and pioneered in 1972 in Japan. And since then, it's been the people's favorite sake in Japan, and now the world's favorite. It is truly a raw and bold style sake with a kick. You get the nose of the earthy nuttiness and the taste of the tropical fruitiness. And yes, it is sweet and strong with 19% alcohol. Can I have some food? Thank you. All right, so I'm pairing this with tonkotsu ramen that Sarah-san was presenting earlier. Goes really well with my sake over here. So let's try this first. And you see, it's a cup ramen, cup noodle ramen, tonkotsu flavor. So it does have this creaminess and a saltiness. Also has this like a lot of fatty oil, which is, I'm not saying anything wrong, bad, but it's really, that makes the tonkotsu soup and tonkotsu ramen well. So let's pair this with my sake while you have the flavor in your mouth. So this funaguchi, if you pair with the tonkotsu soup, the saltiness makes it a little sweeter, but also the creaminess of the soup makes the sake milder as well. And actually, if you pour this, just 1 spoon of funaguchi into the tonkotsu ramen soup, it actually adds a little sweetness and a umami into the soup too. So this is just a secret. I don't want to tell this in front of the chefs, but sometimes I add funaguchi into the soup, 1 spoon of funaguchi, and drink and eat ramen.
How does that change the flavor, Leo?
What is it?
How does adding a little bit of funaguchi to the ramen soup change the flavor?
So, okay, so funaguchi, I would say it's sweet, but it's also bold and full body. I would say it's like a little oily as well compared to the other sake. What it does is it adds the sweetness into it. It cuts a little bit of the sweetness, the saltiness in the ramen and makes it milder. Did that answer that question?
It sounds so good.
Right. So let's move on to the next sake.
Hey, Leo, I just want to point out to our listeners today that there's a trick as well with the funaguchi. I love that you drank right out of the can because that's a way we like to encourage people to enjoy it.
Yes.
But for some restaurants, they like to pour that into a glass. And so if you just open the tab, don't take the top all the way off. It's really easy to pour into a glass. It's a little harder to pour in the glass when the whole top is off. And then if you don't finish it, you can keep the plastic and put it on the top and keep it for later. So it's got a lot of great,
So it's meant to, we started selling this, of course, in the stores, but also we did sell it in the vending machine in Japan. You can drink sake in Japan on the streets. So that's why the size and the, the secureness comes from. Also, like to answer your question, I don't know if it was a question, but let me add some comments to that. So when you serve this at restaurants, yes, some people tend to open the whole thing and try to pour into a smaller glass, but it is difficult because the glass is smaller than the rim over here. So I will say, instead of opening the whole thing, just clip it, just open a little hole in the can and pour into the smaller glass. That makes it easy to pour for the waiters and waitresses out there, all right? Okay, so can I have the next sake, please? All right, so this is our new product that came out last September. It's called Kikusui Perfect Snow in the can. Probably some of you remember it as this. It's the nigori, the cloudy sake. So this sake was born and made in Japan, only available to the world, but not to Japan. The sake became one of the recognized nigori sake of its kind, which it has the thickness and the creaminess that no other nigori sake has. You'll get a hint of a coconut notes, maybe almond-like taste, and the texture it's like oatmeal with the alcohol in it. And yes, this is sweet as well, and that's actually stronger than the Funaguchi, the previous sake that I was showing you. It has 21% alcohol, and you have to shake this well before you drink it. This one too, you have to shake it. Can I have the food, please? All right. Are you allergic just by looking at it? I'm sorry for those people who are allergic to bananas, but who would never thought of pairing sake with bananas? You probably use banana name for to get the aromas or the taste, but have you paired it with the food, the sake? Probably not. So this is something that I discovered when I was told by New York Mutual that we're doing a food pairing. Accidentally, I found out. So I'm gonna have a bite. Sorry, Rachel. So it does have this earthy, grassy. It's not too sweet, and the texture is like I'll probably say it's like thick on the banana. I never described banana taste, so forgive me about that. So I'm gonna pair it with the perfect snow. I want you to try this at home. What it does, it actually transforms everything. The banana doesn't taste like banana. Our perfect snow nigori doesn't taste like nigori sake. It actually tastes like McDonald's chocolate milkshake with alcohol in it. So I want you to try this. Some of you might already know. Some of you might pour this on top of ice cream. But I'm just telling you, pairing this nigori sake with banana, it gives you this chocolatey, nutty notes. And yes, of course it has alcohol in it, but because of the texture of the banana, and also the nigori is creamy as well, it makes it milder. So it's not strong, it's not too sweet, it just tastes like chocolate milkshake. All right. So I'm done with the pairing now. I don't know, do we have time? Maybe 2 more minutes?
Not too much, but if you have any remarks,
Okay.
please let us know.
Bring more food, come on. All right. Do you recognize this? This is
Oh my.
famous KFC, the fried chicken. This one goes really well with the Funaguchi as well. So the sweetness and the boldiness, if you pair it with the fried chicken over here, it cuts the oiliness over here. And it actually adds the umami, like the tonkotsu. And also the fried chicken was on Sarah-san's presentation as well. So I want you to try this, believe it or not, it goes really well. Next food, please. Cheese with Brits, the cracker. So this is the brie over here, and we have the Swiss cheese. This one over here goes really well with our nigori sake. What it does, if you pair the nigori sake with the brie cheese, it makes the cheese more cheesy, but also it makes it more like a buttery note. So, cheese, maybe you think that cheese only go with wine, but also it goes really well with sake too. This was also in the presentation. The Swiss cheese, if you pair it with the nigori sake, our sake, I don't know with others, but our sake, it makes it taste like milk with honey mixed. I don't know if there's a product that tastes like that, but I'm just, describing it by notes. You get the milky honey notes by pairing this together.
Sounds
Unfortunately,
delicious. Thank you, Leo.
unfortunately, I can't eat cheese, so I cannot taste it. But I did it. I did try when I was, practicing. So I'm just telling you what I got from this. All right.
That
So
was
that's
really
it.
great.
So that's it.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to say that there are many ways to have fun with sake and amazing things you can do with. Uh, Compared to the wine, sake is like a teenager, but it's full of potential. There's no limit of the way of sake, and we need to find out new ways how to serve and how to drink. And it's all up to you. So let's do this together. All right?
Thank you, Leo. Lots of
So much.
wonderful comments on you and the can. Thank you guys so much.
I'm so nervous.
You did perfect. Chizuko-san, I'm going to share now. Are you ready?
Okay, yes,
Hi.
I'm ready.
じゃあ、
Yes.
行きましょう。
I think user signs and the Hirano signs ready too.
じゃあ
Okay.
画面共有、
my
画面
turn.
共有。
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for attending Nanbu Bijin Sake webinar today. I'm not going to rakugo like the other, but I'm going to try to make it something fun, the presentation today. So my name is Chizuko, a certified sake sommelier from Sake Discoveries. And today's the special brewer guest, Yuzo Kuji, who is a brewer and the executive director and the younger brother of Kosuke Kuji, the fifth generation brewery owner of Nanbu Bijin. Can you see that? We are also accompanied by Masa Hirano, the sales rep of Nanbu Bijin. We will introduce Nanbu Bijin Brewery and two kinds of unique sake with food pairing ideas. Hope you all enjoy and learn something new today. Nanbu Bijin was founded in 1902 in a small town of Ninohe City, the northeastern part of Japan, known as Iwate Prefecture. If you are familiar with sake, you have heard the name Nanbu Bijin before, and you may think they are one of the largest breweries, but in fact, it is not. Nanbu Bijin is a craft sake brewery that is still run by Kuji family. As all breweries care about their ingredients, the same goes for Nanbu Bijin. They carefully select sake rice from other regions to produce their sake, but they mainly purchase locally sourced rice from the local farmers grown Gin Otome and Gin Ginga. Since using locally sourced rice, many of these sakes have been honorably acclaimed and noted for some hours. Nanbu Bijin is also proudly using great quality of water from the old well inside of the brewery. The water is medium hot water with well-balanced calcium, phosphorus, and magnesium. It comes from Orizume Basenkyo, where there is a prefectural natural park. The water they use allows the sakes to have just the right amount of boldness and balanced umami, which Nanbu Bijin is looking for. The current brewery owner, Kosuke Kuji, graduated from Tokyo University of Agriculture and immediately took over the brewing business from his father. Since Kosuke became president, Nanbu Bijin Brewery changed drastically in their sake flavor profile and brewing systems by integrating new and old techniques. The result is a great example of his accomplishments since they have gained many awards nationally and internationally. This is a new facility which was built last year. This facility is used for the special clear sparkling sake Nanbu Bijin Awa, and is used primarily to maintain temperature control storage as well as state-of-the-art bottling line. Another unique fact of Nanbu Bijin is that their sake is certified vegan and kosher. If you know sake well, you will have no doubt that sake is vegan. But still, many people in the world who have never tried sake before have no idea what sake is. The CEO Kosuke Kuji decided to have this certification to introduce the beauty of sake to new audiences all over the world. To receive the kosher certification, there was a dinner held at the kosher restaurant in New York a few years ago. Kosuke Kuji was surrounded by many rabbis from all over the world and celebrated his kosher sake.
Oh, I don't know how to get unmuted.
As I
Can y'all hear
mentioned,
me? I wanted to say, can you say
okay.
what he's doing
Yeah.
in this picture because it's so funny?
Yes, it's funny, right? Okay, so this party was actually, the very serious kosher restaurant in Brooklyn. And this day was actually the biggest, the kosher anniversary day in the year. And so many rabbis, they gathered from all over the world. And it just accidentally happened, the party at the day, same day. And Kujisan sake was so popular, and all rabbis got so excited. And all the rabbis banned tables and they started singing, and they called him Mr. Sake, Mr. Sake. It was kind of crazy, but it was unbelievable, huge, big success party. And next. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, Nanbu Bijin has been presented with many awards, such as the Champion Sake title at the largest international wine competition called the International Wine Challenge. The Nanbu Bijin Tokubetsu Junmai has beauty, fruity aromas, and easily defines Kosuke Kuji's motto. He wants to brew sake that makes people smile like sunshine. You can see his big smile pictured above and see that his energy is contagious. No doubt that you would smile instantly if you met him as well. Now I would like to introduce a completely different style of Nanbu Bijin, which is brewed by today's special guest, Yuzo Kuji, who is the younger brother of Kosuke Kuji. His sake is not a typical fruity ginjo style, but in fact, a bolder and drier kind with higher acidity and clean finish. His sake is great served at any temperature, but mainly designed for serving warm and aging. His sake line is called Yuzo Special. Yuzo Special is still limited in production, even in Japan. But since last year, one of his sake is now available to the US market. This Yuzo Special Junmai made from Miyama Nishiki sake rice, brewed in 2015. This sake's SMV, sake meter value, is plus 15, which means it is extremely dry, and acidity is 1.9, which means it is much higher than most Junmai sakes in market. Uniquely enough, the sake is bottled only in 1.8 liter Magnum bottles. You may consider the shelf life after it's open, but this sake has a long, long shelf life, and you can age it as long as you like. The matured flavor makes this sake even more flavorful. It's still a very limited quantity, but if you are looking for something that is a dry junmai, bold and unique, then I highly recommend to try this one. Okay, now let's talk about the food and sake pairing. This kind of rich and bold junmai sake, like Yuzo Special, is great with something rich and flavorful dishes, such as salted mushroom and cheesy style of food. If you are looking for Japanese food pairing, as I can recommend, such as saba no miso ni, cooked mackerel with sweet miso, sazae no tsuboyaki, table cooked in its own shell with soy, grilled eel, fatty tuna toro, grilled eggplant with sweet miso, wagyu sushi with truffles, or something like that. I know it's truffle is not the the really Japanese food, but nowadays many people use truffles on sushi on top. Anyway, next. If you are looking for non-Japanese food pairing, try something meaty, buttery, or eggy dishes are great. Great examples of dishes like grilled duck, bacon, carbonara, wagyu sandwiches, hamburger steak with cheese, beef steak, something like that. The bold rice pour the flavor from the sake matches perfectly with the rich dishes, but also the sake's acidity cut the flavor of the pot. If the sake is warm, I guarantee you would be amazed by the balance. The next unique sake is Nanbu Bijin's no sugar umeshu. Are you okay? The next unique sake is Nanbu Bijin's no sugar umeshu, ume rose. Usually umeshu or plum sake is brewed with lots of sugar and brown in color because it's caramelized by the sugar. However, this Nanbu Bijin is sugar-free, but has natural sweetness. Usually sake is brewed with about 80% of steamed rice and 20% of koji rice. But this base sake of umeshu is all koji, which means it is made 100% from koji rice. The sake has natural rich umami and sweetness, so it's unnecessary to add sugar. The color is a beautiful rosé that you don't find often for plum sakes. It's great served at any temperature, for example, on the rocks, chill, and even extremely hot. Most umeshu is sweet, so you may serve it as aperitif or digestive with a dessert. However, this Nanbu Bijin no sugar umeshu is surprisingly food friendly too. For examples, lamb chops and with cranberry sauce or spicy chicken, the Chinese chicken dish. Spicy ramen and sundubu spicy Korean tofu soup, buffalo wings, yakitori, grilled chicken with wasabi, grilled duck, stewed beef tongue, or something like that. Of course, this umeshu is great with dessert as well. If you want to pair with Japanese sweets, I recommend to try red bean paste dessert like a strawberry, daifuku mochi, mizuyoka jelly, or any red bean dessert. Also great with matcha green tea dessert too. If you want to try non-Japanese dessert or snack, cheesecake with sour chili sauce, the bitter chocolate, or rhubarb jam with black pepper on cheese toast. This is my favorite snack at home. Anyway, the ume's tartness and umami from all koji are paired well with light sweetness, fruity sourness, bitterness, and spice. Another unique way to enjoy this umeshu is by adding some whiskey. You can adjust the amount as you like, but even just a couple drops of whiskey makes a big difference. It gets a little spicy, smoky, and more flavorful, and a great way to introduce this plum sake to whiskey lovers as a cocktail. Lastly, I'd like to mention that current Nanbu Bijin labels will be redesigned from next year. It looks much simpler, and it's going to be easier to recognize the brand with the same look and feel. But Yuzo Special and Umeshu, it's the same as with the current design. Okay, thank you for your attention. We hope you enjoyed this presentation and hopefully you can try some new ways to drink sake and fun food pairing. ありがとうございました。
That was really beautiful.
Sorry, I didn't do any, the rakugo thing. Oh, sorry, Yuzo-san and Hirano is here. Mute please, Hirano-san, Yuzo-san. I think they are already drunk. So, oh my, Hirano is missing. So I think he must, he might go to bed already. But
Hirano restroom.
We'll see him again at the Q&A.
yes, I don't know. He is still awake, but hope.
Oh.
Yuzo-san, hello.
Yes.
Hirano-san.
Sorry.
あれそうか。
Sorry, I was going to introduce them earlier, but you know what? I was a little nervous, so I kind of skipped that. So now I want to introduce the right side, Yuzo-san. Yuzo-san.
Hi.
Hi. Hi. Yuzo-san is the younger brother of Shacho Kosuke-san, but also he is actually brewer, and also he is kanzake, warm sake master. So definitely Yuzo special. This sake is great for warm, and he keep drinking, and he keep sending me the funny video what he is drinking, and I couldn't hold the excitement, and so he made me laugh so much. So. Anyway,
あー、良い酒、うまい酒。
you're drunk already. See? Sorry, I think we should move on for the pass on the
Turned into a
TMT for
party,
Hakkaisan.
Thank you, Chizuko. Thank you,
Hirano-san. Thank you so much.
It's amazing to see you guys. And it's so good, so good to see Tim Sullivan Sensei as well. Moving right on.
Hi, everyone.
Hi,
Thank
Tim.
you, Chizuko. Thank you, Leo. Good to see you guys in Iwate.
Thank
Hi,
you.
everyone. My name is Timothy Sullivan. I'm going to be talking to you today a little bit about Hakkaisan Sake Brewery. So to get started, let me share my screen. All right. So Hakkaisan is a sake brewery that was founded in 1922. The other breweries we've mentioned today have a much longer history. Hakkaisan is a much younger brewery and founded only 3 generations ago. It's located in Niigata Prefecture, and I want to show you where Niigata is in Japan. Here's a quick little map of Japan. And Niigata is located on the Sea of Japan side, but the area, Minami Uonuma City, is in the southern part of this prefecture. And it's only 90 minutes from Tokyo, so you can get to southern Niigata very quickly by bullet train in Japan. And Niigata's famous for a few things. It's famous for rice culture. It's famous for the vast number of sake breweries that they have. There's over about 90 sake breweries in Niigata, more than any other prefecture. And it's famous for snow. Niigata is actually right in the firing line of cold Arctic air coming from Siberia over the Sea of Japan, and it gets a tremendous amount of snow. All of these things tie together to make Niigata a real epicenter for craft sake production. Now again, the brand I'm going to be speaking about today is called Hakkaisan. And I wanted to show you Hakkaisan Mountain. So this beautiful mountain you see here is located right by the brewery. In fact, when you're standing in front of the brewery, you can see the top of Hakkaisan Mountain directly. What Hakkaisan means in English is 8 peaks. So there's 8 little small peaks at the top. They're a little bit hard to see, kind of like a zigzag. So let me call them out for you. So there you go. Those are the 8 peaks of Hakkaisan. We actually call Hakkaisan brand in English 8 peaks sometimes. So if you ever see that on a menu or in a store, you know that we're talking about Hakkaisan. Now, the reason they call the brand Hakkaisan is not only because this is the imposing mountain that's right by the brewery, but also Hakkaisan gets its water from the base of this mountain. So we use 100% snow melt mountain spring water directly from Hakkaisan Mountain. So that's the reason that our brand is so tied to this particular area. Now, I mentioned that it snows a lot in Niigata, and this is a picture of the same mountain, Hakkaisan Mountain, in the wintertime. And the snow can get very, very deep. And I have a picture that I took a couple years ago in January. This is the Hakkaisan guest house, and this just gives you a quick impression of how deep the snow can get. We're talking 6 or 7 feet on the ground at any one time. This is a way of life and a culture for this region. They call it Yukiguni, or snow country. And I think it gives everybody hardiness to their soul, and it really informs the food culture and of course the sake culture as well, surviving these long winters. And in the past, before they had modern roads and things like that, this part of the country would get cut off during the winter months. So they had to be very self-sufficient and survive, and so much of their culture centers around this snow culture. So it's really important. For sake, one of the primary things we get from all this snow is some of the cleanest, softest water in Japan. This is a picture of the Hakkaisan brewery. This is the new facility where we make the sake we're going to be tasting today, which is a Hakkaisan Honjozo. And I had the good fortune to work at Hakkaisan for 1 year. So in 2016, I moved to Japan in October, and I did a 12-month brewing internship working as a sake brewer. And here you can see me in my uniform I had to wear every day. I call it the marshmallow suit. And this is a picture of me taking rice out of the steamer and bringing it to the cooling area. This was such an amazing experience, and it gave me a life-changing 12 months learning how to make sake and growing in appreciation for all the things that brewers and all sake breweries do. What I wanted to do now is talk to you a little bit about 2 sakes that are very key to the Hakkaisan brand. We're going to be talking today about the Hakkaisan Tokubetsu Honjozo and also Hakkaisan's Clear Sparkling Awa. All right, let's go to the Honjozo first. And what I wanted to do is talk a little bit about that sake, give you some tasting notes for that sake, and then run through a few food pairing ideas. And then we're going to do the same for the sparkling. All right, so the Tokubetsu Honjozo, Tokubetsu means special. So this is a special Honjozo. Honjozos normally have a rice milling rate of 70% remaining. That's the entry level for Honjozo grade. But we go all the way down to 55% remaining for our Honjozo. So that makes it special. You can kind of think of it like a reserve grade. It's a very luxurious treatment for this grade of sake. And we use primarily Go-hyakuman-goku rice for our Honjozo, which is a local sake rice. It has a reputation for producing sakes that are airy and a little bit lighter. And that's definitely true for our Honjozo as well. The SMV, or the sake meter value, that's a measurement of how sweet or dry the sake is. It's a +4, which would indicate to me that it's a very lightly dry sake, not too harsh and not too sweet. So what can you expect from the flavor profile from the Hakkaisan Honjozo? Well, I've got a bottle right here, so I'm going to open this up and do a little taste for us. Overall, the impression that I think people are left with when they taste the Hakkaisan Honjozo is a very smooth yet dry overall impression. The texture is round, and because it's a Honjozo, it's one of the alcohol-added styles of sake. Some sakes are Junmai styles, that means no added alcohol, but this is a Honjozo, so there's a very small amount of distilled alcohol added. That gives a roundness to the sake. It grips the palate just a bit more, and it really makes the texture very, very smooth as well. When I smell the sake, we're going to get a very gentle, soft rice aroma. And the warmer this gets, more of the koji aroma comes out, which is that mold that we use to break down starch into sugar. It has a little bit of a chestnut aroma to it, really lovely, but you get a very nuanced rice aromas when you smell this sake. This sake is also very good for warming. In the pantheon of all the sakes that Hakkaisan makes, this one, the Honjozo, is our best-selling sake out of all the sakes we make. And one of the reasons for that is that it's a very affordable style of sake, and also you can serve it at a wide variety of temperatures. So this is very good for serving chilled, room temperature, or warm. And we're going to look at food pairings for all those different temperature ideas. And the signature thing about Hakkaisan across the board is that the sakes we make have a dry, crisp finish. This is very palate cleansing, very refreshing, and very indicative of the Niigata region. All right. So just a quick word about temperature. There's going to be a whole other seminar on warm sake later today, which I hope you'll all go to. But because this sake is so versatile when it comes to temperature, I just wanted to throw this chart up really quickly and let you know that anywhere along this chart, you can serve Hakkaisan Honjozo. It's the most versatile sake when it comes to temperature that I've ever known of for a long, long time. I'm having it room temperature right now, and you can also warm it up to slightly hot, 113 Fahrenheit, 122. You can even go much higher than that if you like very, very, very warm sake. And you can also serve this chilled. It brings out more crispness in the sake if it's chilled.
Hey, Tim.
Yeah.
One of the things I think is so cool about this particular bottle is if you ever have the chance to visit in Japan, visit Tokyo or any other major city, and you're just walking through, you know, alleys of different restaurants, how many of them will just have these bottles lined up in the window? Like, this is our house sake. You know, it's pretty cool to see how much of a volume of this is drunk in Japan as well.
Yeah. Yeah, this sake is produced in a volume that makes it accessible to everybody. But I want to say along with that, even though we try to produce a wide supply of this sake, all the koji is produced by hand. Every tank is stirred by hand. This is not a mechanized factory-made sake. It still has that handcrafted touch to it, even though we produce many, many, many smaller tanks that are all stirred by hand. And that's one of the philosophies of Hakkaisan is wide supply. If you don't have a good, affordable, easy to access sake, then it's just something for the elite. And we want to make sake that's really accessible to everyone. So this is our offering in that area. So that's a great point. I wanted to run through a few pairings real quick for this sake. We talked about soup earlier when we talked about warm sake. So if you have a warm honjozo, I love to pair that with a nabe or a hot pot, something that's warming and rich. When it comes to chilled sake, this honjozo becomes very crisp and dry when you serve it chilled. And one pairing I like is poached salmon, or you can even go with sashimi. So fish dishes that you want to cleanse your palate and have a really crisp finish. I find that a chilled sake goes really well with that. And yakitori is also a great example of something that you can pair Hakkaisan Honjozo with when it's at room temperature. It really brings out the umami and the savoriness. And I brought, because it's still kind of the morning, I brought another idea to pair. This is a buttermilk cheddar biscuit that I made last night. And this has some sea salt on top. It's got the lactic acid in the cheese, and it has a little bit of savoriness from the buttermilk. So I'm gonna go ahead and give this a bite and have a little pairing. It's really good. Really fantastic. The sake really cleanses the palate. You get a little bit of fat from the cheddar, a little bit of tang from the buttermilk, and the umami really comes out in the room temperature Hakkaisan. It's a really good pairing. And one thing I want to say about yakitori and about hot pot, these are just analogs for other foods you can have in the West. So if you have yakitori in Japan, you can have grilled chicken with roasted vegetables in the States. Or if you have a hot pot nabe in Japan, you can have a chicken vegetable stew in the States. So these are just jumping off ideas for pairing. Now, really quickly, I want to run through a few pairing ideas for our sparkling. This is a champagne method sparkling, and this does a secondary in-bottle fermentation. The overall profile is fruity with melon on the aroma, and it has a nice, clean, dry finish and a very fine bubble. This could be consumed as an aperitif, just as a welcome drink or as a way to whet your appetite. We talked earlier about oysters, and oysters and sake are a magical, magical umami pairing. One of the best pairings I've ever had in my whole life. And I find that this sparkling has just enough savory umami on the finish to bring out the lusciousness of the oysters, but leaves your palate very cleansed and refreshed. And to go along with my cheddar biscuit, I also recommend Parmesan cheese. This has a nuttiness and an umami to it, and it pairs well with honjozo or with the sparkling. And with our sparkling, there's a lovely melon note on the aroma, and I love to pair that with salads that have a citrus or a fruit in them. If you've ever had a salad with a slice of grape or a slice of grapefruit or a slice of orange in there, it's really wonderful. And last but not least, I really like sparkling poured over sorbet as a sake float. This is a very elegant and elevated version of a float, but this is absolutely delicious. I've had it with a homemade sorbet, and it just really levels out the sweetness and creates a lovely sparkle on the palate. So that's absolutely a wonderful way to enjoy Hakkaisan sparkling. All right. So that kind of wraps it up for me, and I want to pass it back to Rachel. Thank you so much for letting me talk a little bit about Hakkaisan. I hope you enjoyed.
You all made me very, very hungry, especially you, Tim. Shouldn't have skipped breakfast, but this brings us to the most exciting part of our first webinar, the raffle. Our moderator, Ms. Masai Kusada, is drawing a name now. One person in this room who will receive a beautiful set of gorgeous Japanese glassware. Please, winner, if your name is called, please look to the chat box so that we can get your information. All right.
So I randomly assign numbers to our guests and through via web randomizer here. And so our first winner is Akira Azuma. If you're still here, I'm going to shoot you a message and we'll get your info so we can send those glasses over to you.
Congratulations, Azuma-san, our very first winner. Thank you so much for participating. Now we're going to open up the floor to more and more and more questions. And I know that me and my team, we all have questions we also want to ask these folks who we get, you know, such rare access to. Let's see, do we have any questions queued up? I see, oh, Maxwell, my very, very wonderful and good coworker, Maxwell Lear, asked if there are any other good examples of Honjozo pairings. I thought maybe it's good to open that question up to the brewers as well. We each have Honjozos available. Leo, Kanai-san, you guys have your main product is a Honjozo. For me, I said that one of my favorite Hakkaisan Tokubetsu Honjozo pairings is the Jamaican style goat curry. It's got like a little bit of gaminess and a little bit of sweetness, and I don't like the spicy type, so it really just works well, that oil cutting and that umami richness with the thick and heavy curry. All right, well, Sarah-san?
I was actually interested in asking our friends in Japan and those who visit frequently if they know of any restaurants that are not traditional washoku or traditional Japanese food restaurants that are selling sake. We talked a lot about Italian food and sake, and I wondered if there are any Italian restaurants selling sake in Japan or anything else like that that they can share.
Maybe this is a good question for Chizuko. You're there a lot, and I think
Yeah. Well, you know, it's a local restaurant in Iwate Prefecture. It's right by Nanbu Bijin Brewery, but it's called Bonu. It's kind of French restaurant, but it's more like Yoshoku style. It's like kind of Japanese Japanese Western cuisine place. The chef used to be, you know, the head chef of the, you know, the French chef at the hotel restaurant, and his cuisine is pretty much kind of technique as a French cuisine, but you know, it's kind of a little more, you know, down to the kind of casual side, and so Yoshoku style. It's a really serious Yoshoku style, and he's, you know, that restaurant is selling the Nanbu Bijin very well. So it really goes well, the Western cuisine with the sake. And also some restaurant in Tokyo, it's, for example, like Narisawa. It's one of the most the famous recognized French cuisine. That place, has the options, sake pairing course and a wine pairing course or something like that. It's Japanese, Japanese chef, but it's French cuisine too. And yeah, it's in Japan. So many places nowadays kind of try to offer this sake to pair with their the food. Even it's not Japan, but it's Noma. It's really famous, world famous. The restaurant, they choose this. They use this type of sake, the middle of the course, instead of wine. And then one of the chef that started his own restaurant in Kyoto. It's kind of nomad style in Kyoto, but they are offering the sake and shochu cocktail, and of course sake itself too. It's called the Rura. It's really beautiful, the French cuisine, the nomad style restaurant in Kyoto too. Yeah.
I think it's
Wow.
interesting because even when you go to izakaya in Japan, a lot of times they'll give you like a little snack when you first sit down
yes,
and order.
absolutely.
And one of my favorite things to receive is potato salad,
yeah.
which is like a very American food, but the Japanese potato salad is like,
Absolutely.
Yes. Like it's so delicious with the sake.
Yeah, potato salad sounds like kind of American cuisine, but I believe that 99% of Japanese people love potato salad, and Japanese way. It's a little bit, it's pretty similar, but you know what? The key point, the key is the Japanese potato salad they use Kewpie mayo.
そうですね。
Yes, the Kewpie mayo has a little bit higher acidity, the sour, the vinegar. It's a little stronger taste than most, the American mayonnaise. So it's more kind of balanced. Yeah, it's a great with sake too, of course.
Well, we have some really great comments in the chat. It seems like everybody's really enjoyed themselves. Thank you to everybody for participating. I believe that there will be, you'll be redirected after the seminar. Masai-san, would you like to share a little bit more as we say thank you to everyone?
Yep, so you will be directed after you close out of this webinar over to our order form. So you can, if you're interested in purchasing any of the sakes we talked about, we have some great discounts. Of course, this is applicable to our customers who have active liquor licenses in the New York and New Jersey area. If you are out of state, please feel free to reach out to your rep and we'll make sure we get those sake to you and you can inquire about pricing. But we just wanted to thank everybody for being here today on our first webinar for our first virtual expo.
I guess since we have just 2 more minutes left, I wanted to ask one more question. This one would be to our friends in Japan, Chizuko, Tim, Leo. I wanted to know if there are any foods that are a challenge to pair with sake, something that we and our customers and everybody can challenge ourselves to find a pairing for. 例えばそのワインの中にあんまりよくペアリングできないものをアーティチョークとかアスパラガスとかブラッセルスプラッツとか、そういうものなどが、あんまりよくできないペアリングがあると存じますが、日本酒の世界の中にそういうチャレンジなフードペアリングというものがあるんでしょうか?
Well, my answer is actually it's a little difficult to find, to pair with. It's difficult sake to pair with. Actually, what I asked the Nanbu Bijin side people they said, they have no idea. It's really hard to find the food. But only one thing that very fragrant. It's very fragrant daiginjo, the aromatic one with shiokara or something. I don't know. The squid guts. That kind of pairing is really kind of no. To me. Of course, a little, it's not too much a fishy one. It's okay. But, if you want to enjoy the super premium side, aromatic, fragrant style sake, I think I highly recommend to pair with something not too fishy food. What do you think? Tim, that hates shiokara.
I think that natto should be avoided at all costs. Sake or no sake. One area that I find is very difficult for sake pairing is when you get into the extremely spicy foods. It can be a little overwhelming for sake. I find a gentle spice can pair really well with create magic with certain sakes, but when you get into the quite spicy foods, that's a big challenge, I think, sometimes for sake. But it really is difficult. It's a big challenge to make a bad sake pairing. I really do believe that.
I agree with Tim.
Great news.
Yes, but you know, funny thing is that, you know, it is the really popular restaurant is called Sakamai in New York, the Lower East Side. Sakamai is offering the beautiful the natto dish. It's called natto mochi, natto butter mochi. It's kind of grilled mochi wrapped with a nori, but it's the butter made with a little kind of, it's kind of paste thing, but it's like a kind of natto mixed butter. So that taste is really beautiful match with the sake, any sake. It's really surprising. My husband, American, he doesn't like natto, but he loves natto mochi butter, you know, butter mochi at Sakamai.
Chizuko-san, I will meet you there in 10 minutes.
Just never bring natto to a brewery. That's the only thing. You can talk about it, drinking it with sake, but never bring it with you to the brewery. That could be a big no-no too.
All right. That's all the time we have. Thank you everyone for joining us, and I hope to see you in the next one. Warm sake, kanzake, and shochu. Thank you so much.
Sayonara.
Sayonara.
ありがとう。